An army of dog zombies is devouring my town. When we lived in the city and it was time to put Muncher to sleep, Dad said we had to leave his body at the vet's. I didn't want to leave my dog behind, even if he was already gone. Muncher looked so fragile lying there, his tongue hanging out, his limbs limp like a marionette with its strings cut. He might have been sleeping, if not for his wide, unblinking eyes. I was 9 years old when we brought Muncher to the vet. Maybe my parents believed I could handle watching the light fade from his eyes like a candle being snuffed out, his panting gradually slowing until it stopped. If that's what they thought, they were mistaken. I had nightmares about Muncher for years. They eventually faded, but the dark dreams returned when it was Diva's turn to head off to that great kennel in the sky. By then, Brett and Sierra were off at school, and with me preparing to leave for New York in a couple of months, my parents had downsized into a quaint little bungalow near a rural town called Kearney. In the countryside, you don't leave your dog behind in some sterile vet's office, destined to become just another body in a mass grave. You bury them yourself, out back on your own land. Around here, most folks skip the vet altogether and use a shovel when the time comes. But Diva spared us that choice. She passed quietly in her sleep one night before we had time to consider what we'd do. I loved Diva. She was a rescue, a gorgeous Belgian sheepdog we got right after Muncher. She was there through the hardest years of my life. She comforted me when Brett and his friends lobbed water balloons into my room while I was asleep, destroying every book I owned. She stayed by my side through my first breakup when I thought my heart would explode from the pain, and through the second when I was sure it already had. She was there when Dad got cancer, and honestly, I believe she's the reason he survived. 4 years cancer-free now. It felt like the somehow took the disease into herself, pulled it out of my father with nothing but love and sheer determination. It wasn't much of a shock when the tumors appeared beneath her skin, and even less so when the disease took her in under a month. We all knew, deep down, that Diva would have laid down her life for any one of us. After 4 deceptively peaceful years, cancer had waited long enough. It needed a soul, and this time, it claimed hers. I buried her myself. Dad offered to do it. I think he genuinely wanted to take that burden off my shoulders, but I told him it was okay. Mom didn't say a word when I left the house that morning with a pine box and a shovel. I hadn't expected her to. She had always been uneasy with death, let alone being so close to it. I carried Diva's body into the woods behind the house. I didn't go too deep. That might have been my first mistake. Our place sat just on the edge of town, and maybe if I'd walked 20 or 30 more paces into the trees, maybe then Diva would have stayed dead. The box I'd built was heavier than I expected, and once I was out of sight of my bedroom window, it felt like I'd gone far enough. "Goodbye, girl," I said, staring into the hole I dug. My hands were raw, blistered from the work. "You were a good dog. Thanks for everything. Thanks for saving Dad." I paused, feeling like I should say more, but the words wouldn't come. The moment passed before I could catch it, and suddenly I was shoveling the dirt back in. That might have been my second mistake, not giving her the proper farewell she deserved. She earned one. But I couldn't think of what to say. I chose a large stone to serve as her marker and wrote an inscription with a Sharpie I grabbed from the house. The ink was supposed to be waterproof, but even if it faded, that was okay. The grave wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. I know that sounds odd, being possessive over a pet's grave, but it felt personal, like something I needed to keep close. "Here lies Diva," I wrote. "The best dog you could hope for. Take care of her, God." 2002-2011. As I stood there, it struck me that God is just dog spelled backward. It was a strange thought to have right then, stranger still, considering what happened next. At the edge of the forest, I turned back for one last look at Diva's grave. The inscription was still visible on the stone, but as the first drops of rain began to fall, it looked like the stone, or maybe the message itself, was weeping. "How'd it go?" Dad asked as I walked into the kitchen and joined him at the table. He always had Fridays off, a bit unusual for a car salesman, but he had the numbers to make his own rules. "It was fine," I said. "Did you cry?" I hadn't. Honestly, I hadn't even thought about crying until he asked. I'm not the stoic type. Most of the guys on my high school football team were way tougher than me, so I just told him the truth. "That's all right," he said. Mom was at the sink, pretending to wash dishes, but from the way she was staring into the faucet and the tight line of her lips, I could tell she was listening to every word. "Don't feel bad, Ethan. She knew you loved her." She said it all in a single breath, like air rushing out of a balloon, high-pitched, fast, and unsteady. Dad glanced at the back of her head, trying to read her, then turned back to me with a nod. "I don't feel bad," I said quietly. "I just didn't cry." "She knew you loved her," Mom repeated, softer this time. "What are your plans for today?" Dad asked, changing the subject. "Not sure. Why don't you take Lila into town? Pretty sure it's Fish Fest this weekend. I'll give you some cash. You can get her one of those hand-carved wooden necklaces or something. I hear they sell all kinds of knickknacks." If I had to describe my dad in one sentence, it would be this. He's the kind of guy who says knickknacks completely unironically. "I don't want your money," I said, but still took the 20 when he offered it. After a few texts, I drove over to Lila's place. Once her dad's farm disappeared in the rearview mirror, Lila asked about Diva, how I was doing, how I felt about it all. I told her I appreciated her asking, but I didn't want to talk about it. I parked behind Rooster's Pub so Lila could use her employee parking pass, and we walked hand in hand through town toward Victoria Park. She was in the middle of a story about a new coworker, Caitlin or maybe Katie, who she claimed was a brown-nosing nightmare. I nodded at all the right moments, managing a quick exhale through my nose to mimic laughter when Lila joked that the girl was probably sleeping with the owner. But my mind wasn't on the story. I was thinking about Diva. I remembered when she was just a puppy, so excited to see my mom come through the door with arms full of grocery bags that she peed straight into the carpet like a tiny fire hose. I could still picture my mom's tired expression, caught somewhere between frustration and amusement. That memory lingered as we walked beneath the fluttering Fish Fest banner. All summer, Victoria Park had been a teen hangout spot, good for smoking during the day and drinking at night. But now it was transformed. Bright booths lined the paths, filled with vendors selling crafts and trinkets to cheerful locals. Toward the back, the grill stations were alive with sizzling fish and fries, manned by smiling cooks. We skipped the collectibles and headed straight for lunch. The food vendors were set up around a half-circle patch of grass filled with picnic tables and folding chairs. At the center stood a large plastic trophy painted gold, the grand prize. Each year, the crowd voted for the best dish, and the winner's name was etched into the trophy forever. Around here, winning Fish Fest was as close to the Stanley Cup as Kearney would ever get. Lila wandered off to one booth, and I picked another. "Thanks for stopping by Harry's House of Halibut," chirped a teenage girl behind the counter, probably Harry's daughter or niece. "What can I get for you?" "I don't care," I said flatly. "My dog died today." Her smile wavered. She hurriedly handed me a plate and ushered me aside after I paid. I didn't blame her. All I could think about was how much Diva would have loved this deep-fried feast, and how she probably would have devoured the newspaper it came wrapped in too. Lila offered me a bite of her meal. I accepted, chewing and swallowing without really tasting anything. I wasn't hungry. I gave her a bite of mine in return because it felt like the polite thing to do. When she asked which one I preferred, I told her hers, even though they both tasted like the same bland gray mush to me. As hollow as I felt, I could see that Lila was trying, doing her best to cheer me up. So I forced a small smile, even though it tugged painfully at the corners of my mouth. Want to check out some of the booths? Lila asked. Sure. Did anything catch your eye? No, I said. Did something catch yours? I saw this woman selling silver jewelry from Thailand. I think the money goes to an elephant sanctuary. Will you buy me something? Sure. She wasn't being selfish, far from it. We'd only been together for 7 months, but she already understood me about as well as my parents did. I liked buying her things. If she picked something she liked and I paid for it, she'd wear it every day without fail. She led me through the crowd, tugging on my hand the same way Diva used to tug on her leash when I took her for walks. We ended up at a booth run by a kind Thai woman selling silver jewelry, all proceeds going to help elephants. I bought Lila 2 rings. She slipped one onto her ring finger and the other onto her pinky, smiling as she pointed out, half teasing, half serious, that it was either the left or right ring finger that symbolized engagement. I can't remember which. By the time we paid and she was admiring her hand like a crossing guard stopping traffic, it was just after 12:30. We wandered through a few more booths without buying anything. My mood had started to lift. By 1:30, most of the heavy gray clouds of grief had parted, and I could finally glimpse the sunlight breaking through. Let's go to your place, I said. Lila had already met my parents, but I had my own reasons for wanting to avoid home. You ready? Sure, she said. We were nearly at the parking lot when someone called out behind us. Heil to the young couple. Come see my wares before you go. The voice belonged to a man who looked to be in his 40s. He was all limbs, thin and angular, like a spider on 2 legs. He wore a loud purple suit with a matching top hat and sported a long, curling black mustache. When he smiled, I saw a mouth half full of gold teeth. Everything about him screamed salesman. His booth was draped in rich purple fabric, matching his outfit perfectly. Hyla? Lila echoed, puzzled. Forgive me, miss, he said in a thick accent that made forgive sound like forgive. Hyla is a friendly greeting where I come from. Where's that? I asked, scanning the booth with only mild interest. More silver jewelry, more wooden trinkets. I'd seen dozens just like them today, none worth remembering. A place far, far from here, he replied. But I wasn't really paying attention. I'd asked out of politeness, not curiosity. That was my third mistake, not paying closer attention to the man in the purple suit. And as the saying goes, 3 strikes, you're out. So what brings you to Kearney? Lila asked, still engaged. Kearney has been on my radar for quite some time, the salesman said. I've often heard this town is full of people with eclectic taste, and it takes exactly that sort of taste to appreciate what I have to offer. Well, it's nice to meet you. I'm Lila Price, she said, reaching out for a handshake. Felix Emmanuel Lamneck IX, he replied, taking her hand with a bow. Charmed, my dear. Have you sold much? I asked. That was when I finally noticed something truly different. A necklace with a black horsefly suspended in a tiny glass bottle filled with preserving fluid. I flipped over the price tag, $300. Sadly, no, Felix said. It seems that while Kearney may have refined taste, its wallets are not quite as generous as I had hoped. Why is everything so expensive? I asked, turning over a few more tags. Surprisingly, the horsefly necklace was the cheapest thing on display. Ethan, Lila said, slightly embarrassed. That's kind of rude. I was just curious. That's quite all right, Felix said warmly. I turned to look at him, and his eyes gleamed, bright and sharp like stars on a winter night. Ethan, was it? My wares may appear no different in quality than the knickknacks your neighbors are hawking, but I assure you there's something else entirely. They belong to another league. How come? Lila asked, and I noticed her subtly slip her new silver rings into her pocket. I'm afraid you'd have to purchase something to find out, Felix said, and there was a trace of sadness in his voice. as though it pained him to even suggest it. "I don't think I've got that kind of money," I told him. "Sorry." "That's quite all right," he said again, flashing a grin that showed off at least 8 or 9 gold teeth. "Thank you." Lila called as I gently guided her away from the stall. We drove to her place. Both her parents were still at work, so we had the house to ourselves. Normally, we would have taken the opportunity to hook up, but I just wasn't in the mood. Instead, we sat on the couch, holding hands while I stared at the TV. I Am Legend was playing. When the movie ended, I gave her a kiss goodbye and left. I don't remember what excuse I gave. Maybe I told her the truth, that I needed some time alone. The dog dies in that movie. It hit me harder than I expected. Made me feel just as awful as you think. I barely slept that night or the next. I had expected nightmares about Diva, visions of her lifeless body or of her scratching at the door, begging to be let back in. But to my surprise, she never came. It was Felix who haunted my dreams. Each night, I found myself back at Fish Fest with Lila. We'd wander into his booth again, just like before. But instead of the fly necklace, something new always caught my eye. One night, it was a ring made from 2 small finger bones twisted into a loop. Another time, a silver bracelet hung with real scorpion pincers that rattled when it moved. Once, I reached for a pair of wooden earrings, so ordinary looking they seemed out of place, until I touched them and blistered welts erupted on my fingertips. Every time, I'd check the price tag. Every time it read, free. None of the items ever tempted me enough to take them, and the dream would always end the same. Lila and I would leave the booth together, just as we had in real life, while Felix stood behind us, grinning with that eerie, gold-toothed smile beneath his curling black mustache. Then I'd wake up and stare at my alarm clock. Barely an hour had passed. When I drifted off again, the cycle repeated. Night after night, I had the same dream 3 or 4 times, each version nearly identical, except for the object on display. After a week of this, I called Lila, ready to admit that I was coming apart at the seams. But as soon as she answered, I knew something was wrong. She was crying. Through shaky breaths, she told me she'd been having the same dreams. Every night, the same booth, the same parade of strange items. But there was one difference. "Last night," she said, voice breaking, "I gave in. I picked something." I asked her what she took, but she told me it wasn't her choice. In the dream, I had picked out a copper-colored necklace with a whistle hanging from the end, and I had placed it gently around her neck. And when I woke up, she said, her sobs growing heavier, it was under my pillow, the same one. It had the whistle and everything. "Don't touch it," I said, instantly alert. "Don't put it on. Don't even think about blowing the whistle." But when she spoke again, her words came between ragged, panicked sobs, and I knew I was too late. "I blew it," she wailed. "I don't know why. I had to." Just seeing it, it felt like I didn't have a choice. Like if I didn't blow the whistle, he was going to come into my room and kill me. I didn't have to ask who he was. "What happened when you blew it?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Lila's sobs cut off. Silence filled the line. "Lila?" I said, pulling the phone away to check if the call had dropped. Still connected. "Hello?" I said again, louder this time. Just as I was about to hang up and drive over to her house, I heard her voice. Soft, barely audible. "Nothing," she whispered. It didn't even make a sound. I just blew into it and nothing happened. And then I realized what I was doing, how dangerous it might be, so I threw it in the garbage. But I think it's too late, Ethan. I shouldn't have blown it, but I did, and now something terrible is going to happen to me. I tried to calm her. I told her I'd come over, that it was probably just a weird coincidence, the shared dreams and all. But I didn't believe my own words. She was convinced something awful was coming, and deep down, I believed her. I hung up, got dressed, and stepped into the shower. I was halfway out the door when I heard my mom call my name. "Ethan," she said. Her voice was quiet, shaky, like someone was holding a gun to her head and telling her to stay calm. "Are you okay, Mom?" "Diva's in the backyard." I froze. Then I rushed into the kitchen. She was standing by the window, pale as chalk, her face frozen in disbelief. I opened my mouth to reassure her, to say it was probably just a stray, that Diva was gone, and this dog might need help. But the words never came. I looked out the window and felt every drop of blood in my body go cold. It was Diva, or at least what was left of her. She was dragging herself across the lawn, inching toward the house. Her fur was mostly gone, skin rotted away in strips. Dirt and insects clung to every part of her. One eye socket was empty, and a yellow mushroom had sprouted where her eye used to be. Her insides trailed behind her, intestines sliding along the ground like a grotesque pulsing leash. A splinter of her pinewood coffin stuck out between her toes like a mocking reminder of where she should have stayed buried. She was less than 10 feet from the house and coming fast. I bolted to the back door and slammed the screen lock down just in time. Diva leapt, slamming into it with a paw raised toward the handle. Her remaining eye was dull and red. When she saw me, she bared her teeth and snarled. She pawed at the handle again, testing the door. When it didn't budge, she took a few steps back. Then she barked and threw her decaying body against the door with a sickening thud. Her face slammed against the mesh of the screen door and burst straight through. Shredded skin and exposed teeth jammed into the opening as hysterical barking filled the house, manic and furious. She twisted her decaying head, snapping her jaws through the gap, trying to force her way inside. Then she rammed the frame again. Wood cracked and splintered. I bolted. "Mom, we have to go," I shouted, running back into the kitchen to grab her. "Go?" she echoed, dazed. Another crash exploded from the back door, louder this time. A part of it, maybe all of it, had given way. "Go!" I yelled again. "Get in my car!" I grabbed her by the shoulder and dragged her toward the front of the house. "I have to get my wallet," she muttered, her brain clearly broken by the sight of Diva, our dead dog, now snarling and resurrected. She tried to pull away from me. There was another violent crash, the final blow. The back door tore off its hinges and slammed to the ground. I heard Diva's claws skittering across the wooden floor. She was in. Whether she stumbled through or charged in full force, I didn't know. But she was barking again, loud and furious. I shoved my mom through the front door just as Diva came tearing around the corner. Her face was worse up close. The mushroom bobbed grotesquely in her ruined eye socket, but her other eye gleamed like a coal, bright, feral, demonic. I slammed the heavy oak door between us as she lunged. She hit the other side hard. The wood groaned but held. Then silence. I heard her retreat, not surrendering, circling, going around the house. "Mom, the car!" She was just standing there on the porch, dazed. "Ethan," she murmured, "Diva is sick." "No, Mom, she's dead. Move." I shoved her too hard. She staggered, nearly falling down the steps. Diva hadn't stopped barking. Her voice was shrill and rabid as she raced around the outside of the house faster than she'd ever run in life. "Move." I sprinted ahead, not to abandon my mom, but to unlock the car, get it started, and throw her door open. She was following, finally, though still only managing a weak jog. It hit me then. I couldn't remember the last time my mom had run from anything. I jumped in the driver's seat, started the engine, and flung open the passenger door. The car rumbled to life. She was 5, maybe 6 steps away. All she had to do was get in and shut the door. Diva came tearing around the side of the house like a banshee, her gray, rotted teeth glinting like serrated kitchen knives. Mom didn't see her, or maybe she couldn't bring herself to look. She took one trembling step into the car. Diva was still on the far side. She was going to make it. She had maybe a second to spare, but it would have been enough. Then Diva leapt. She soared clean over the car. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. 1 second she was there, a snarling corpse, and the next she was gone from view. Then Mom screamed. Diva had pulled her back out of the car. The shrieking ended abruptly. Outside the passenger window, Diva was ripping into something that used to be my mother. She tore and shredded, blood spraying over the torn fabric of her clothes. I slammed the door shut, threw the car into reverse, and peeled out of the driveway. I didn't cry, not yet. I knew if I looked back or even allowed myself to process what had just happened, I'd be swallowed whole by it. So I didn't. I floored the gas and drove. Lila's farm was 10 minutes away. I made it in 5, kicking up a massive plume of gravel and dust behind me. On the road, I passed an elderly woman in a yellow sundress, screaming as she ran. Chasing her was a skeletal greyhound, moving without flesh, without muscles, barking with no throat or lungs. Before I could react, the creature lunged. The woman fell, and the dog was on her, tearing her apart in a flurry of blood and bone. Crimson bloomed across the yellow fabric, and I jerked my eyes away. Not a minute later, I passed a pack of decaying mutts, medium-sized, missing eyes, limbs, chunks of fur and skin. They saw me and gave chase, snarling and yipping as they sprinted behind the car. After 30 seconds, they gave up. One caught sight of a nearby farmhouse where a man in overalls was working on a tractor. The pack peeled away from me, heading straight for him. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I tore across Lila's lawn, ignoring the driveway entirely. In the distance, out in one of her dad's fields, I saw 3 dogs ripping someone apart. Denim overalls. Blood gushed like pop blisters. One of the dogs looked up. It had only 3 legs and no lower jaw. It saw me, left the others, and began loping toward the house. I bolted out of the car, sprinting across the front yard, and dove through the front door without looking back. "Lila!" I shouted. "Ethan?" Her voice came from upstairs. I took the stairs 4 at a time. She was sitting on her bed, her face streaked with drying tears. From the window, she had a clear view of the field. I didn't have to ask what she'd seen. "Ethan," she whispered, "did I do this?" "No," I said, but the copper whistle necklace jingled faintly in her clasped hands, and I knew I was lying. "One of them's coming," she said as I helped her up. "I know. They just came out of the ground," she said, dazed. "They didn't even shake off the dirt. One of them is Jillian. She died 3 years ago, but the rest I don't recognize." "What's happening?" "I don't know. Maybe they belong to the people who lived here before you," I said, "or before them." She looked at me, pale and trembling. "How far do you think this goes? How many dogs?" "All of them," I said quietly. "At least all the ones in Kearney." Lila didn't argue. She didn't freeze like my mom had. I got her into the car, and by the time the decaying mutt once known as Jillian slammed her skull into the side of the vehicle, I was already pulling out of the driveway. "Where are we going?" Lila asked. "Coastal dealership," I said. "Center of town. I doubt anyone's buried a dog under a car lot. I need to get my dad." "Okay," she said softly, wiping her tears away with the sleeve of her shirt. "I just realized," she said after a pause, "I'm an orphan." I reached across and squeezed her hand. There was nothing else to say. Her mother had died when she was 11, taken by a drunk driver. Her father, well, he was still in the field, being torn apart by reanimated teeth and claws. My hand brushed the whistle necklace she was still holding. I recoiled. It was freezing cold, cold enough to burn. I rolled down the window, snatched the necklace from her hands, and flung it into the dust. "What if we need that?" she cried. "What if it's the only way to stop them?" "That whistle draws them in," I said. "There's only one person who can end this. We'll deal with him after we get my dad." "Felix?" she asked. I nodded. Kearney was in worse shape than I'd expected. A half-rotted German shepherd with no tail was tearing into a heavy-set woman outside McDonald's. Down Main Street, a pack of skeletal dachshunds was chasing a screaming couple along the sidewalk. Overhead, storm clouds were gathering, thick, black, and angry. It felt like Felix had summoned them himself, just to blot out the sun. "Oh God," Lila whispered. "I just hope," I said, gripping the wheel tighter, There isn't one of those mass pet graves nearby. She looked at me, waiting for a laugh, for me to take it back and say I was kidding. But I didn't. I couldn't. I kept imagining it. An army of undead dogs storming into Kearney, Muncher's skeletal frame leading the charge at the front. "Oh God," Lila said again, softer this time. I pulled into the parking lot of Coastal dealership fast enough that the brakes screamed and the tires smoked. The building's exterior had once been almost entirely glass, meant to showcase the newest models to passing traffic. Now every window was shattered. Inside, 3 dogs were feasting. Each one had claimed a victim, tearing into them with bone-cracking intensity. None of the faces were recognizable anymore, but a cold shiver ran down my spine. If I stared long enough, I knew I'd start to notice details. Familiar shoes bouncing with the body they were attached to, the pattern of a blood-soaked shirt that used to hang in someone's closet. I knew I could stop, take it all in, let it break me. Instead, I kept driving. "Ethan," Lila said as we merged back onto Main Street, her voice thin. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "Okay." She didn't speak for a while. Rooster's pub was burning now, flames licking out through shattered windows. More than one storefront had its windows blown in, with at least one dog, zombified, snarling, inside each. Some were devouring what was left of people. Others were prowling, stalking, hunting. I blew through a red light. A police car sat at the intersection, but most of the officer behind the wheel was gone. Half his body was stuffed into the bloated gut of a golden retriever. The dog's blue collar was still intact, but the rest of it was riddled with bullet holes and missing half its skull. "Where are we going?" Lila asked. "Where do you think he is?" "It's Saturday," I said. "We're going to Fish Fest." Victoria Park was dead quiet. Torn booths and scattered crafts littered the field like the aftermath of a tornado. The Fish Fest banner still fluttered overhead, cheerful as ever, except now it had 2 dark red splatters that weren't part of the original design. I drove straight onto the grass, cut the engine, and let the car settle into silence. We sat with the windows cracked, listening. "I woke them," Lila whispered. "I blew the copper dog whistle. I woke them from the dead." "It's not your fault," I said, placing a hand gently on her leg. "If it hadn't been the whistle, it would have been something else. If you didn't take it, maybe I would have. How could you have known? It was just a dream." We both lingered on that last word. We both knew it hadn't been just a dream. The evidence was all around us, in flames, blood, and broken glass. This was real. Felix had made it real. Kearney was being torn to pieces, and it was his doing. "I don't see anything. Let's go," Lila said finally. "Not yet." "What are we waiting for?" I opened my mouth to tell her I didn't know. Maybe we were waiting for some kind of sign when the wind picked up. It screamed to life like a banshee, shrieking with the force of a hurricane. The vendor booths, most of them just canvas and cheap wood, were ripped from the earth and flung into the air like leaves in a storm. Some vanished into the sky, gone forever. The heavier stalls that resisted the wind were flattened instead, crumpling like toys under the invisible pressure. Only one booth remained standing, a purple canvas tent untouched by the chaos. It matched the color of the vendor's suit. And there he was, Felix, standing beneath it, waving us over like an old friend. "Let's go," I said. Lila and I got out of the car, hands finding each other without thinking. The sky was dark, almost all the sun blotted out by clouds and smoke, but a single shaft of pale light broke through. It fell directly on Felix in his booth, like a spotlight on a Broadway stage. His golden teeth glittered as he smiled. "I was starting to think I wouldn't have any customers today," he called out cheerfully. "It seems Fish Fest has been canceled. A shame, really. Someone from the town council ought to have sent a memo, would have saved me the trouble of setting up. Then again, after what I've seen today, I suppose it's not surprising. I suspect the mayor has other matters to attend to." "Make it stop," I shouted, forcing my voice above the wind. Felix ignored me. "Dreadful, just dreadful," he he continued. Not a single soul in sight. Even the fish vendors failed to show. I suppose they're what's being served for lunch now. I wonder who tastes best. He laughed, a harsh, scraping sound, like a poker dragging across burning coals. Behind his booth, the park was in ruin. Tables and chairs were scattered across the grass, overturned and shattered. In the center of the clearing, the Fish Fest trophy lay on its side, glinting dully in the wind, like it missed the people who once crowded around it with laughter and joy. What did you do? Lila yelled. We stopped about 10 feet from Felix. His smile faded. What have I done? He repeated, tilting his head. I came a long, long way for you, Lila. I heard your dreams. I heard what you wished for, and made sure no one else in this miserable, rotting little town wandered into my booth. I saved that whistle just for you. I put it on layaway. He stepped forward. His eyes glittered. I expected you to thank me. Lila stared, trembling from head to toe. You begged, Felix said, voice rising now. You said you'd give anything to keep Ethan here, didn't you? Anything to never lose him. You said it every night, for weeks. I turned to look at her. Her face was pale, stricken. She couldn't speak. Somewhere a few blocks away, dogs were barking again, and all I could think was, please, let them not be eating someone else I love. This is your fault, girl, Felix said, his voice rising over the wind. If you just let the dogs take you, let me do things my way, you and Ethan could have been together forever. You would have had eternity. But no, you didn't want that, did you? If you didn't want the dogs to eat you, you should have picked something else from my collection. Something else. So that was it. That was the answer to the dreams. Whatever Lila or I had chosen, it would have tried to kill us. Every item was a curse, just dressed differently. I snapped. I charged Felix, fueled by rage and desperation, intent on hurting him, punching, kicking, clawing, anything I could do. But he moved with the twitching speed of lightning, impossibly fast. He snatched my collar with one gloved hand and lifted me off the ground like I weighed nothing. I'll have no more interruptions from you, he said coldly, and flung me like a rag doll. I soared through the air, yelling for Lila, and hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through my body. When my vision cleared, the Fish Fest trophy was lying inches from my face, its golden surface glinting under the smoky sky. He'd thrown me nearly half the length of a football field. I turned my head, my neck groaning in protest, but still intact. I saw Felix and Lila far off. He was speaking to her. I couldn't hear what he was saying over the wind. And she was crying, eyes squeezed shut, shoulders shaking. Felix was approaching with one hand out, fingers curled like a claw. I didn't know what kind of deal Felix had struck, not exactly, but I could guess. If dogs were clawing their way out of graves, if demonic salesmen appeared in dreams with cursed trinkets, then of course it was her soul he was after. If Felix wasn't the devil himself, then they were clearly colleagues. I rose unsteadily to my feet. I didn't think, I just moved. I reached for the Fish Fest trophy. The moment my fingers closed around its stem, it began to glow. Warmth surged through my hands, bright gold shining against the stormy sky. I gripped it in both hands like a club and turned toward Felix. The warmth spread up my arms, into my chest, into my mind. The trophy didn't speak in words, but I could feel its message. There was a force, something good, not divine, not God, but still white and righteous, flowing into me through the trophy. A force meant to stand against Felix's blood-red and smoke-purple evil. This power wasn't stronger than Felix. Not quite. Maybe it was his equal, maybe even a little less. But it was enough. The trophy wasn't just a symbol, it was a vessel. Over the years, people had poured pieces of themselves into it. Their joy, their pride, their laughter, their belief in something simple and good. Every summer it had stood as the emblem of Fish Fest, glowing under the sun while friends and families gathered. That's why the white and gold force could use it, to channel its power through me. It spoke not in words, but through the warmth still pulsing in my hands. I had one chance. One true strike before the power drained, before the glow died, and we were out of time. Felix turned the moment my grip tightened on the trophy, his body twitching unnaturally. He could feel it, that I had found a weapon, or that the weapon had found me. His eyes blazed with black fire. "Die!" he shrieked, leveling a long, pale finger at me. His nails were ink black, dagger sharp, glinting like obsidian. At first, nothing happened, but the trophy pulsed ominously in my hands, a warning. The moment was slipping. I moved, went from a stagger to a jog, then broke into a full run. As I pounded across the grass, the earth trembled beneath me, shaking like a minor quake. Something massive was coming. From the far end of Victoria Park, the dead came crashing through. Undead dogs by the dozens, rotting, skeletal, twisted by decay, stampeded toward us. They snarled and barked, and some laughed. That was the worst part, their laughter. Dry, crow-like bursts that curdled the air. And leading them was Diva, bound to me by the love we shared in life. She had followed that tether all the way into town. I realized she'd probably been running to me since the moment I left the house. I charged at Felix, forcing every last ounce of speed from my exhausted limbs. The trophy's golden light was dimming fast. I raised it high and swung hard, aiming for his head. But he was quick. He slipped back just in time, and I missed. Lila screamed behind me. I had overswung. Off balance, the trophy was still arcing through the air, too heavy to recover in time. Felix stepped forward with predatory calm. One icy hand seized my throat. The other clamped around my wrists, locking them like shackles. His grip was freezing. Then suddenly he let go, hissing, recoiling. I hadn't struck him. She had. Lila had caught the falling trophy under my arm and, without hesitation, delivered a crushing upward blow to his chin. The force snapped his head back with a sickening crack. Felix screamed, a long, piercing wail of fury and disbelief, and then he erupted into ash and smoke, torn apart mid-scream. His final cry hung in the air, thin and high like a siren, before the wind took it and carried it away. I turned around, and Diva was there. She took one more step toward me, then leapt. She never landed. She exploded into dust less than a foot from my face, disintegrating in midair. Behind her, the other undead dogs followed suit, vanishing one by one like they'd been swept away by an invisible tidal wave. In seconds, they were all gone. The wind, which had roared and howled just moments before, was already softening into a breeze. And then it was just Lila and me. We were both drenched in sweat, and I realized I was also caked in dirt from where Felix had slammed me into the ground. Lila smiled. I smiled back. I walked into her arms. The trophy lay abandoned in the grass. Its glow had faded. Just plastic now. "Are you okay?" we both asked at the same time. And in perfect unison, we laughed. "I think he's finished," I said, hopeful. Lila shook her head. A shadow crossed her face. "I don't. I think he's gone from here, from Kearney, and maybe he won't ever come back. But he's somewhere. Guys like him never stay gone for good." "Maybe we'll see him in our dreams," I joked, then immediately regretted it. What if that was true? What if he haunted our sleep forever, never-ending trips to Fish Fest, cursed trinkets in a purple tent? But Lila just shook her head gently. "No," she said, "that's not how it works. I can feel it." I squeezed her hand. No explanation needed. I understood. The trophy had shown me things too. Not facts exactly, but knowledge. A quiet awareness of the balance between good and evil. Maybe it had given me the courage to fight. Maybe it had given Lila clarity in the aftermath. "Did you really pray I wouldn't leave?" I asked her. "I didn't even know you were religious." "I'm not," she said, blushing a little, "but I felt like I had to try. I'm so sorry. You couldn't have known." "No, not about this," she said, gesturing at the scorched remnants of town around us. We passed beneath the sagging Fish Fest banner as we walked back to the parking lot. "But it was selfish. I didn't want you to leave. I know you need to go away for school. I love you, Ethan." It was the first time either of us had said it. "I love you too," I replied. Then, without thinking, I added, Come to New York with me. She paused mid-step, then looked at me as we climbed into the car. Come with you? Why not? I said, starting the engine. Once everything's settled, we'll own our parents' places. I'll have to split mine with Brett and Sierra, but they'll sell. They won't fight it. You could sell too. We could get a place together, make it work. She placed a finger on my lips. Let's do it, she said. Then she kissed me, and I kissed her back, and I drove. We left Kearney behind, let the fires burn, and didn't look back. Let's get a cat, she said.